Good evening, everyone. It's Fahim here, and we should literally be starting in the next couple of minutes. We're going to be going through essentially part 2 of this webinar series that I'm doing in lead up to various exams and so on. So literally in the next 1 or 2 minutes, we're going to be going essentially into this and start to really make this journey of getting better at musculoskeletal system a lot easier for you. I've just spent the entire day today making my notes and finishing off the upper limb, which is pretty much all finished now. And it's been, put it this way, I've just literally had to have a shower to just freshen my mind, because when we start to look at the wrist, and there's a lot to cover. I can't tell you exactly how much there is, but there's absolutely a lot to cover. So we're going to be getting into this, and we are just about to start right now. So let me just organize myself. Here we go. I hope you can see the slides, which you should be able to see. And let's pretty much start. So for those of you who are joining me today, welcome. My name is Fahim. I'm a pharmacist prescriber, contractor, and founder of MedLearn. And this series I'm doing for pharmacists, medical students, doctors, nurses who want to essentially either brush up their skills in the musculoskeletal system anatomy, or rather they want to start to learn the anatomy of the musculoskeletal system with a clinical approach. In our previous webinar, which was yesterday, we started to look at various books and literature that can help you on this journey. And I also gave you some pointers on how I've actually spent 6 to 8 weeks wasting my time. And I've now felt that I found an actual structure that can certainly help me. So I hope you get a chance to look at that video if you've missed out on anything. But essentially what I said was that you need to pick a book that is something that you are finding comfortable to read, get the review version. And I didn't get a chance to touch upon notes. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos where they talk about writing notes is a waste of time, don't make notes. I don't necessarily agree with that writing notes is a waste of time, because everybody studies differently, but it's what you do with those notes. If you're literally just doing parrot fashion and you're cutting and copying and pasting what's in the text in another format, I'm not sure what benefit that would give you. But if you're reading something and you're like, right, can I explain this in my own words? And you're writing it down in your own words, then I don't think that can do you any harm, but rather can do you benefit. So I'm not against writing notes, but it's what you do with those notes. If you're just copying and pasting, I think that's a problem. But if you're writing notes and you've read a passage and you're explaining it in your own words, there's no harm in that. Or you may be making up mnemonics, or maybe you're drawing pictures for it to make sense to you. But just simply cutting, copying, and pasting probably won't do you any benefits. That's my thoughts on writing notes. So without any further ado, I'm just about to switch my phone off, because the phone can always be an absolute distraction. So let me just quickly do that. And let's pretty much crack on and get into this. Let's have a look where we are. Here we go. And we can pretty much turn this off. Perfect. Okay, right. So let's move into it then. So today I want to cover the definitions, because I found that if you have a good understanding of the various terminology that's being used in anatomy, things become easier for you and stuff is not foreign. And that's what's really, really helped me, because prior to this, I was looking at the muscles, I was looking at the tables in the text, and some of the words were just so foreign that I wasn't able to form that connection. And when I was trying to revise this or try to recall certain muscles, certain terms, it just wasn't happening. And that wasn't because I don't have a memory or I can't remember, it's because it's very foreign. It didn't make sense. It's like you reading a language, but you don't understand what the terms mean. So the first thing that I did after wasting like 8 weeks was to go back towards the definitions. So I've highlighted some definitions that I feel are going to be important for the upper limb, the thorax, and the back, and the rest can be pretty much at your leisure. But the first one is the acatubulum, and please excuse my pronunciation because it can vary, but essentially this is making reference to this sort of area here. And what we see is that essentially this actually very much does look like a small vinegar cup. So when I see this term that's mentioned in the text, I can now relate to it because I've seen a picture, for one. I know it looks like a vinegar cup, it looks like this, and it makes sense to me. The other term was the acromion or the acromion. And what you find is when you look at the scapula from the back, And if I draw this for you like this, and what we find is that we have this, from the back, we have this part that sticks out and then ends up going like this. This part here, which is sticking out, is the acromion. Why do they call it the acromion? Number one, this part is known as the spinous. I'm just going to put SP, spinous process. So what does spinous mean? That in Latin, when something sticks out, for example, let's say you have a shape like this. Let's say you have a shape like this, and you have one part that sticks out like this, and another part that sticks out like this. They called this the spine. It was spinous, it sticks out. And when you look at the scapula, so the back part of the shoulder blade, we also have one part that sticks out, which is here. So they call this the spinous, and it was a process, and they call it a process because it sticks out. And this spinous process continues all the way forward to this part. And this part, they call this the acromion. So you might say, why do they call it the acromion? Why not just call it the spinous process? The reason why they called it the acromion, and this was in the times of, for example, Galen, and if you remember Galen in the times of Latin and French and Greek, when they were doing various research in the human body, they realized that actually various different other structures attached to this part. Remember, and this might be a bit weird for you to understand, the human body is connected. So, and this might be a bit controversial, but there isn't an arm and there isn't a leg. And you might think, what am I talking about? And what I'm saying to you is, whenever you do human dissection, you realize that everything is one piece. We as humans have given it parts to make our understanding easier for us. So somebody, when they looked at the human body, thought, okay, why don't we call this part the arm? Why don't we call this part the head? Why don't we call this part the leg? But if you realize that everything is one piece, there is no differentiation, it's all one. You know, the head isn't separate from the neck, or the neck isn't separate from our leg. Everything is continuous. You can have a look, everything connects. But in order for us to understand the human body, we've decided to label parts. So we don't just call it the body. For example, I'm looking at you through a camera. There's the lens, there's the body of the camera, there's a part that sticks out. Maybe I might call it a sticky part, whatever. So that's what they did here. So don't get confused. So the acromion, and you'll see this part, is this part here. And as you can see, this part is the highest point from where the spinous process will basically come around. And that's why they call it the acromion. And acros means highest, and omos came from shoulder. So it was the peak of the shoulder. So whenever you see the acromioclavicular joint, at least you should know that, okay, acromio, hey, that rings a bell. That's that part that Fahim mentioned was continuous from the part of the back of the spine, it's of the back of the scapula. That's what should be there. I'm not going to go into ala here, which means wing. I'm going to ignore that for now. But I want to go on this muscle and the anconius muscle. Again, excuse my presentation. And anconian means elbow. So if you ever see this muscle, for example, the anconia muscle or the anconius muscle, you should now know that muscle actually makes reference to a muscle that's to do with the elbow. So that's going to be important for you. Arthro refers to joints. And whenever you're studying the musculoskeletal system, you're going to come across the words like amphiarthrosis or diarthrosis. And now you know that the word arthros means joint. So that's going to be important for you to remember. As we start to move forward, we have this term that's known as the articularis. And that basically muscle that essentially will join a joint. So any muscle that joins a joint may have the word articularis here. So we have it's quite small, but you have a muscle here that's attaching, or that essentially it joins a joint, and we call it the articularis. And we know that articular or articularis essentially means when two pieces of matter or two joints are coming together. So from this slide, what you need to understand for the upper limb is that the acromion makes reference to this continuous structure that is continuous with the spine of the scapula itself. Anconius, you should remember as elbow. And maybe if you see the fact that the word E exists in anconius, might help you remember elbow itself. So keep that in mind. So let's move on further. And we have this term here, which is essentially auricle. And the word auricle essentially means ear-like. So we can see somehow this resembles an ear, which it probably does, because if you think of the ear itself, and the ear is like this, and we can connect it here, we have the tympanic membrane and so on. So this part here would be like the auricle. You can see it does look very similar to the structure here. Brachii or brachium refers to upper limb. Again, that's going to be quite important for you because you're going to see you're going to see the biceps brachii, the brachyradialis, the brachium. You should know it's referring to the upper arm. Another term here is going to be the calcaneus, and calyx refers to heel. And this is going to be very, very important when we start to look at various parts of the lower limb itself. So that should raise or make sense to you. When we look at carpi, the term carpi, and I've spent practically all of my time was spent on the wrist today. So the carpi radialis joint and all these carpi. So every time you see carpi, you're thinking of wrist. If you see cervical, you're thinking of the neck itself. That's going to be important. And chondron means cartilage, because you're going to see the costochondral joint or the chondrovertebral joint, whatever it might be. Wherever you see chondron, it means cartilage. Keep that in mind, cartilage. Costo refers to ribs, and chondron or chondro refers to cartilage. So again, quite useful for you. Conoid, and you're going to see this conoid tubercle, or this word conoid essentially means coin-like. And we see this in the scapula itself. And the area of the conoid, the trapezoid line itself, these form the coracoid ligament. And we're going to go into this in a lot more depth later on. So just keep that in mind, that the term conoid means coin-like. And here we go. Look what we have here. We have coraco, which means beak-like. And if you have a look here, you can see it's like a beak here, beak-like. We also have cranon, and that means head. So you have the olecranon, and ole comes to the term is actually essentially means elbow. So we have ole, and we have chronon, which actually refers to the term head. So this is the head of the elbow. So that should be easy for you. And again, QBT, we have elbow. So nothing's here difficult. So far, what have we gone through? We've gone to acromion. We've gone to, if I remember, if my memory serves me correctly, we've gone to the anticubulum, I believe it was. That was vinegar-like. We've gone through, we also went through conoid, and now we moved on to coraco. We've gone to chronon. We've gone to the cubity. We've done the carpi. We've looked at cuneiform, and cuneiform means wedge-like. So this here, this cuneiform bone is wedge-like, and that's why it got its name. So sometimes they will literally name the bones simply because of what they look like. So we're not that far. We're nearly done with this. Deltoid came from the term triangular shape, and this muscle is definitely triangular. So we can see it's kind of like a triangle. So you can see it kind of sits like this. It came from the word delta. Desmosis means band, and you'll see syndesmosis, and you're going to see that term syndesmosis, and it just means band. So nothing to worry about there. Again, pretty straightforward. And we also have digits, and you're going to see this so much. This term digits is going to be available so much, and you're going to see it so much. And the term digits comes to essentially refers to the fingers, refers to toes. So just keep that in mind. Fibula. And if you have a look at the fibula, we have the tibia and the fibula. You can see that the word fibula resembles a safety pin. And yes, it does. Have a look. Look at this. So when you have the fibula and the tibia, it now makes sense. It resembles a safety pin. And you can see it looks like a safety pin. And that's the same connection that you have here. And that's where they came up with the word fibula. Because they were just people like you and I that just looked at stuff and just gave it a name. So there's nothing difficult here. And you just have to know what the terms actually mean. Again, fore means situated or placed in front. So when you look at the forearm, that's the head of the arm itself. That's why you get the forearm itself. So again, that's going to be quite important. And I'm actually yawning because I've just been up since like 4 o'clock preparing for my exam, and I'm delivering this today. So it's you can see that I'm a tad tired, but it's okay. We're doing well. Right. Also, we have the term girdle, and that essentially means two sets of bones that will actually, the girdle itself, because they call it the pelvic girdle, and essentially it's this structure here that forms the pelvic girdle. It's like a round structure. And you can imagine inside here, we have the skeleton itself. So girdle is literally just like a rounded structure, and inside it we can put something inside, and it just says that it just encircles the part of the body itself. We have the glean, which means cavity or socket, and that's here. This is where the essential humerus will attach, and we have a ball and socket joint here. That's the word glean. So whenever you see glenoid cavity or glenoid ligament or whatever it might be, it's referring to a cavity, and it's the glenoid cavity. Gomphosis means peg-like, and we can have a look. It's like a peg. Here you go. And there the tooth fits inside that socket there, and it's like a peg. So I'm just going to look at this for you, and you can see it's like a peg. It fits inside. That's where they got the word gomphosis from. See, none of this is difficult once you know the definitions. Here we go. Flexor hallucis brevis. Now that sounds like a huge name, but it's not, because hallucis means big toe. Flexor means flexing. Brevis means short. Nothing difficult there. There you go. So you can actually make life easy for you. The word hyoid comes from U-shaped. Keep that in mind. Indices is the forefinger, and four means position in front, and that's the finger here, forefinger. So if you see a muscle, that's the indices or extensor indices, you know what it's making reference to is this finger, the forefinger. Interossi means lying between bones. So here, lying between the bones. A lot of this is not difficult, is it? Once you've got a picture and you've looked at it, nothing difficult here. Lat means the side. So we can see that we have various different muscles here, and we have the tensor fascia lata, for example. Lat means side, the latissimus dorsi, or the lats means the side. Again, there you go. Look, latissimus, wide or the side, makes sense. Dorsi, I believe the term dorsi comes from the dorsum, so it means the back. So that's where it comes from. Longissimus means the longest, and you can see longissimus is the longest muscle here. That's all longissimus means. The labrum essentially means loin, so it means to the side. So we've got the side here, so the loin here. And the loin is normally between here, which essentially we have the lower ribs itself, and we have the hip. So around this region is normally the loin itself. The lumbricals basically comes from the term earthworm. So they looked at this and they said, okay, these look like earthworm. I don't know how they thought they looked like earthworms, but fair enough. These are the lumbricals. So again, nothing tricky here. And this will all, honestly, once you've learned the definitions, it's so easy. Because when you see words like metatarsals, metacarpals, or flexor tendon, or the carpi muscle, or whatever it might be, it's not difficult. And if you've got any questions, please do put them on the chat. I'm happy to help you with them. So meta means besides or after. So it's kind of like for, the word for. So metatarsal, metacarpal. So there's the carpi, which are the wrist bones. Meta means afterwards. What's so difficult there? Nothing. So it's talking about those bones that are after the carpi or the wrist. Pretty straightforward. Multifudis. Multi means many. And we've got the term from the word frenry, which means split into parts. And this muscle, the multifidus muscle, splits into parts, many different parts. Okay, not that difficult, pretty straightforward. I would explain to you the olni means elbow, crenon means head, so it's the olecranon, so it's the head of the elbow. Pretty straightforward. Omo means shoulder, omohyoid. Now, tell me if anybody can write that on the chat. What does the word hyoid mean? And we discussed that. Any ideas? If you want to write it on the YouTube channel, or if you want to write it on LinkedIn or Zoom, tell me what it is. And one of your colleagues is typing now. And what are they saying? Yes, that's correct. Omo means shoulder, hyoid means U-shaped bone. So this muscle attaches to the hyoid bone, and it attaches to part of the shoulder itself. Nothing difficult there. I don't want to test myself exactly what part this attaches to the omohyoid, but I've got a feeling, actually, I'm not going to bother. I've just done my mnemonics today, so I'm not going to bother messing this up. If you know which part of the shoulder attaches to, great stuff. Opponent means against or opposite. So we see that the thumb can do opposition. So that's a term that gets used there a lot. And again, phalanx means log-like. That's what phalanx means, log-like. And you're going to see the phalanxes, because when we start to talk about the wrist and we start to talk about the lower limbs, you're going to start seeing the term phalanxes. And that should make sense to you. So it's log-like structure. It's to do with these fingers here. And policies means thumb. Abductor policies. It's causing abduction of the thumb. Anything difficult there? No. But be careful with the plane of abduction, because when we talk about abduction and adduction of the thumb, it happens in the sagittal plane. So don't get confused. So abduction and adduction for the thumb happens in the sagittal plane, but we will go to that in depth later on. But look, abductor policies, so it's something to do with the thumb. It's abducting the thumb. Anything difficult there? No. We're nearly finished with this, which is fantastic. The word fundus means deep, and pro means before and front. Pretty straightforward. Pronator, meaning rotation of the hand and the forearm, and we'll discuss this in depth. Radialis is making reference to the radial bone. Nothing different there. And the word rhombone comes from this parallelogram. Parallelogram. That's why the word rhomboid. And when you look at the rhomboids, you'll see that there's something like, kind of like this sort of structure. Kind of like this sort of structure in the muscles of the back itself. So again, that's why they call them rhomboids. Makes sense to me. Rotators, again, because they cause rotation of the limb or the joint on the motion. Nothing tricky there. Serratus, look at this muscle. It's like this. Folks, what's difficult here? Look, it's like the edge of a saw. So, serratus. Shaft, longest part. Sternum comes from the term sternum, which means breastbone, and flat surface. Pretty straightforward. Now, you should all be able to figure out what this term means, spinalis. Someone tell me what the term spinalis means to you. We discussed about spine. What does the term spinalis mean? Oh, wait. It's actually written on there, so there's no point you writing it down. Thorn-like, absolutely thorn-like. So that's spinalis there. So it's thorn-like, but it sticks out. And we're nearly done, which is great. Okay, so tarsal means bones of the foot. Tarsal bones. The carpal bones refers to the wrists. Ulnaris means the ulnar bone. Should be straightforward. Vastus comes from the term large area. So it's a large area, vastus lateralis, you know. And zig means union or pair. And we've got this joint here, zygapophyseal joint here. So I'm just going to quickly do a recap really fast. And that is going to be all for today. So I'm just going to quickly go through this once more really quickly. And then you can all basically do what you feel like doing today. So we discussed antecubiculum, and that means vinegar cup. We discussed acromion, that essentially means that it's the highest part of the shoulder. Anconius refers to elbow. Arthro was joint. Articularis was essentially a muscle that is involved between joints itself. We discussed auricle, which means ear-like. Brachia refers to the upper arm itself. Calcaneus, calyx means heel. Carpi means wrist. We had the cervical, and chondron. Chondron means cartilage. Conoid means coin-like. Caraco was beak. We had cranium, which means head. We already discussed what oli meant. So we discussed what oli meant. Oli meant elbow. Cranion referred to the head. So this is something to do with the elbow. Cubiti means elbow. And cuneiform is wedge-shaped, and it's to do with the bones of the lower limb. Deltoid, like the letter delta, pretty straightforward. Desmos meant band. Digits, could be the fingers, could be the toes. And fibula was what? Was like a safety pin. Fore means in front. Glen was referring to the glenoid cavity. Girdle was like in circles, like this. And this is incomplete girdle because you can see that it's not attached here. So it's posteriorly, as they say, it's incomplete, or from the back, rather, it's incomplete. Gomphosis, peg-like. I explained that to you, it's like a peg-like structure. None of this is difficult. When you're going to see these terms, you should be fine. Flexor, halicis brevis. Halicis refers to big toe. Indices refer to forefinger. The term fore meant in front. or possibly after. Interossi means lying between, and late means side. So we are nearly done. Latissimus again meant sides, nothing difficult here. Longissimus meant longest. Lombrum means between, you can see this area here, the head of the ribs, and we had the hip, and that's why this muscle here is referred to as the lumborum muscle. Nothing difficult. Even my wife was sat here smiling as well because she's thinking, yeah, sounds interesting. Lumbricals means worm-like or earthworm-like. And what do we have? Meta, I explained, meant besides or after. And multifudis, again, multi means many, fudis means different parts. So nothing difficult here. Olni means elbow, omo means shoulder. And when we talk about omohyoid, it should make sense. Folks, we're nearly done. And phalanx is log-like. So these are the phalanxes here. We have pollicis, which means the thumb. Profundus, fundus means deep. Pro means before, in front. Radialis meant towards the radial bone. Rhomboid was like a parallelogram, it's just a shape. Rotators, because they rotate. Serratus, like a saw. Shaft, long part. Sternum was essentially like the breastbone, it's flat. Spinidi with thorn-like. Spinalis. Tarsal bones, and we have ulnaris as well. And then last but not least, we have vas, which means large, and zig, which means the joints. And we've covered everything, which is beautiful, in half an hour. And that is all for today, folks, because tomorrow we're actually going to get into the fun stuff and we're going to start to revise the upper limb. So thank you very much for being here today. If you have any questions, do leave them on the chat. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Best of luck with this. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And do subscribe, like, and share the channel itself. I hate saying that, but